Hello, I'm here with Craig Mertens from Inkavo over in the US.
I am the director of growth and education for Inkavo, which is the parent company of Clarity. And so my day-to-day job is working primarily with end users and helping them to successfully adopt our software and then training internally. And then I'm also very active in our marketing team. And so I do training at trade shows, a lot of blog article authoring, a lot of video content generation, and appreciate you having me on here, Jack.
I'd like to talk to you today, if we may, about the sort of the trendy topic of vibe coding and how this affects a company like Inkavo, like Clarity. We're seeing the rise in that and also the rapid bespoke software builds.
Vibe coding, I think, is a word that, a year ago, nobody would know what that meant. And now, I think it's pretty widely accepted. And it's basically just coding by prompting. Instead of writing code, you're prompting, Claude or on ChatGPT to create code, and you're building out your own apps. And so the barrier to doing that is just, it's disappeared. Anyone can do it. And so I think what's driving that is just this new capability that a lot of folks have, and they look at it and they're like, hey, wow, I can build something completely customized to my business and code it myself. So, building software has certainly become easier. But, the thing that hasn't changed is maintaining it. We still have all those challenges around that. And I think that's one of the kind of short-sighted things that people think I can create this thing. The easiest part of creating it is the initial creation. The hardest part is maintaining it. Because guess what? Now you're in the software business.
There's that excitement when you start, but then the reality soon hits. What are the real sort of most common risks, the hidden costs that emerge?
I think what's attractive is you get a custom workflow, right? It's unique. It's branded to you. A lot of times folks look at enterprise software and it can be, very bloated. And a lot of times you'll hear feedback from companies, hey, I just need something simple that works for us. So on the surface level, it seems like a great idea, but then you start getting under the hood. There's a lot of other parts that you don't think about. For instance, backups. How are you going to back up your technology? Is that going to be reliably backed up? Dependencies around people. Are you going to have a team develop this? What happens if key people within the team decide to move to Argentina and take a motorcycle tour around South America? That's a real story from one of our customers that had that experience. Government compliance, GDPR is a daily thing. All the privacy laws about data, things about security. Now, are you holding sensitive financial data within your vibe coded platform that would be in violation of GDPR if it got leaked, or things you necessarily don't want surfacing around the internet, around your customer data, or even payment information, credit card information, billing information. So these are some of the things that people don't necessarily look at when they decide, hey, I'm going to build out something custom for myself. When you have teams like, for example, our company, we have an entire team of people around compliance and privacy and security. There's teams of people that's their entire job, to make sure that we're compliant and that we have bulletproof security within our software and things are backed up. So I guess that's my perspective.
The AI systems themselves don't tend to help you so much with those elements.
Well, I think, why do people are so attracted to this? It's attracted to me. I've built out some vibe coded tools that we use internally. A good example is we have a marketing email grader that we built out, but there's no security risk to these things, really. I mean, there's no compliance aspects to it. So we've created some tools that enhance, like that email grader enhances our existing CRM, but it's not our CRM. It's just a tool that we use to enhance our CRM, because ultimately we're going to take those emails and we're going to load them into our CRM and set up a sequence and do that. So the challenges come along is you get started, you get to a certain point, you get the original software developed and built, and then you go into this maintenance mode of having to maintain it. And all of a sudden, the world of software changes very rapidly, and you don't have necessarily a team, you have a guy. All of a sudden you have all this responsibility now that you didn't, really plan on. And I see this over and over again with shops that they not necessarily vibe coding, but they build out these custom workflows. There's tools that you can invest in that are highly customizable, CRMs that are really customizable, like HubSpot and things like that. And they build out an entire HubSpot workflow, and then you get to this kind of point of no return where like, wow, we're kind of locked into this. And what did we get ourselves into?
Now, in my research for this, I came across this expression I hadn't heard before, which is technical debt.
Technical debt is when you have old code that's kind of holding you back, and you have to go back into that old code and rebuild it with modern technology in order to advance your software. And oftentimes in software development, it's a huge barrier to moving forward. And so it'd be neat if you could just create new things all the time and all your old technology just worked. But it doesn't. And I think classic example of the technical debt, if you start looking under the hood of Microsoft Windows, there's a lot of limits to Windows as a result of Microsoft's tech debt. And so it's something, when software companies get acquired, like when Clarity was acquired, that was, really one of the big parts of due diligence is looking at what kind of tech debt and what it's going to take to bring these platforms to current specs so they can move forward. Fortunately, we're in a great spot with Clarity because we built it in a fashion that is, forward thinking, and, we're not buried in tech debt. But this is a very real thing when you talk about building your own systems. New programming languages, new technologies evolve, and what you'd originally built doesn't really work anymore. There's something newer, better, and you end up in a situation where you didn't really plan on necessarily starting over or a rebuild, but you get put into that situation. And when you're doing something commercially, you're scaling it across hundreds or even thousands of users. When you're doing it for yourself, you're scaling it across you. This is live. So you're doing all the same amount of work, but it's just for you. So that becomes a true cost to your business versus a revenue generation thing, like you're starting a SaaS company where you can justify fixing those things.
Okay, it does sound like it becomes more of a business problem than an IT problem.
I talked to a customer recently at a trade show, and we were talking about shop management software, and it says, I'm going to vibe code and build this whole thing out that's going to do exactly the same thing that you can do. And I'm like, great. He's not a software developer, a very tech savvy guy. Doesn't have a development background, but has an IT background. And I said, I think that sounds like a project that you seem uniquely capable of building. But did you think about some of the longer term issues around doing that? And we started talking about them, and he started kind of hemming and hawing, and he hadn't really thought it through. He hadn't thought about, payment, collecting money and payments and security and all of these things. And the net result was, we had actually a really nice conversation about, do you want to be in the software business, or do you want to be in the business of doing what you do? Or do you want to build signs and print? Because it sounds to me like you're entering the software business and you're a customer of one versus letting the experts do their thing that have tremendous amount of feedback from existing customers in the field and innovation and all these things versus you being 100% responsible for that yourself. I don't think I changed his mind, but at least I got him critically thinking about the direction that he was going in.
You can easily go down that route, can't you? Do you think people overestimate the benefits they're going to get from a custom built soft system?
Partially, but I think there's a more fundamental part to this. I think if you take a look at investment in software as a service, what does it really come down to? Money. Everything kind of comes down to money at some point, right? So folks say, hey, I'm paying this money to this SaaS software every month. I could develop this myself, and then I wouldn't have to pay that anymore. But at the end of the day, what's the true cost to you? Opportunity costs. Like, for instance, you could be dedicating that time and energy that you're building this bespoke system to other aspects of your business, like building out your SEO or additional product development, making your product better, or putting it into marketing or pay-per-click advertising, right? People feel like, hey, I'm tired of spending all this money with this SaaS company, and I'd just like to, do this myself so I don't have to pay that money to them anymore. But in the long term, they're probably not saving anything. They're probably costing themselves in terms of opportunity costs. So
for a system like Clarity, that's been around a while, it's well developed. We've talked a lot about the negatives of one thing, but what are the real positives of working with a system like Clarity that's off the shelf, is modern and established?
I think one thing that's really important, we're experts in the field, right? So we've been doing this a long time. So we understand the signage and print business. We understand how it works. We understand how people operate in terms of how they quote, manage projects, all the nuance. And I think that's one of the reasons that people will try like off-the-shelf project management systems kind of ad hoc put, a CRM together with an accounting system, with a project management system like a Monday or a Trello, and they find that nothing really talks to itself. And so when you're working with a professional set of software tools that are built for the sign and print industry, everything communicates, everything talks. It's the quoting is connected to project management, it's connected to tasking, which is integrated with an accounting platform. Everything is communicating, and it takes a lot of expertise in order to do that. And I think another thing is customer feedback. We have hundreds of customers, and so we get to hear from people what works, what doesn't work, what they're looking for, what they're not looking for. And I think one of the most challenging things about development, especially around clarity, is finding that sweet spot between the feature set and adoption, right? You can have all the greatest features in the world, but if customers aren't using them or adopting them, you failed really as a software developer. And I think a good example of this is I had a meeting with a customer last week, web meeting, and he was showing me how he quoted in his existing software platform. And I said, "Do you really want to quote like that?" And he goes, "No, this is the only way I know to quote, because the software tool that I'm using right now only lets me quote that way." And I said, "Let me show you how you quote the same thing in Clarity." He was like, it was eye-opening to him. He's like, "Wow, I have all this flexibility. I can see exactly how much money I'm making. I can see my material waste. I can see what my production cycle looks like and my run times. And I've got all this data." And I go, "Yeah, so that comes from institutional knowledge and expertise that we know about these unique production processes and how a shop actually makes things." And I think that's one of the reasons that people lean into dedicated systems like Clarity. I think one of the things that we're just uniquely great at is workflow and production management and quoting, tying that all together.
A sort of integrated system where everything kind of talks to each other properly.
I always kind of talk about the signage and print businesses. It's kind of like being a veterinarian. An MD has to worry about one species, right? Human beings. And a veterinarian has to worry about dogs and cats and lizards and goats and horses and all these things. And in the signage and print business, that's the processes that we work with. We have a flatbed cutter, we have a UV printer, we're doing fabrication, we're laser etching, engraving. We might even be dabbling in small format commercial printing like business cards and brochures, or even apparel and wearables. And so that's a lot of different processes that are moving, and each one of those processes has different workflows and has different quoting requirements. And that's where leaning into a company like Clarity that really understands that and builds out these, kind of customized workflows by process makes a massive difference.
I guess another key area, we've touched on a few things like compliance and maintenance and so on, but security must be an increasingly important area. There are so many ways that viruses or other sort of cyber security issues can enter your system. I get the feeling vibe coding may not be the safest way to handle that.
I just went through an internal security course that we teach all of our employees. And because I manage the marketing on our line of business in the UK, part of that course was on GDPR. And that was extremely eye-opening. The stakes of a security breach via GDPR compliance are much higher than, let's say, in the US business place. And one of the things that I think that people lose track of on security, it's rapid pace. There is a new fraudulent scheme. There is a new hacking scheme. There is a new vulnerability, literally daily and weekly in many cases. And so, we have a whole team. That's all they do, that's their whole business is, making sure that our customers are safe and compliant. I think when you start doing these bespoke systems and custom builds and vibe coding, you're just kind of on your own. There's tools and things out there. I suppose you could bring in a security consultant and have them audit, but then what's the point? And then might as well just buy something off the shelf. And I think maybe people have their head in the sand a little bit. I had a customer hack last week. He said, "Don't open this email." It was pretty funny. I knew right away what it was. I think that's the kind of stuff that keeps small business owners up at night. And I know if you're investing in a professional software tool that has a security team and invests in the tools to make sure that their data is private, that their software can't be hacked, that sensitive customer information is exposed to the bad guys, so to speak, sleep a little easier, I would say.
there is a place for bespoke. There's a place for vibe coding. But maybe where would you sort of position it in the sort of in the business management
I think there's a
arena?
great space for vibe coding and bespoke tools, but I think it's at the periphery of your central system. It's, you have a professional system, for managing your shop, let's say Clarity, and it's doing, 90% of the core work you need done. And you have some special needs that are unique to you that you need. Like, good example is that email grader I was giving you, or labor rate calculator that's more granular. Vibe coding and building out some of these custom tools that also don't have exposure to security risks and government compliance. I think, that's a fantastic idea. And so I would phrase it as kind of customization around the edges, so to speak, making your existing tools and systems work better. I think that's a fantastic use case for bespoke software and vibe coding. If you have unique manufacturing logic where you have very specific manufacturing requirements, that it's not going to be something that's kind of on the radar for Clarity because it's just so super specific to what you do. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, developing tools around that. So in terms of like a modern strategy, I would say the strongest approach would be having your structured operational software at the core of your business with kind of selective customization around the edges where that genuine differentiation exists that augments what you're already doing. To me, that's the best way to do it.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. Really appreciate your input on this. A great topic, an important topic.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.